and start. All right, welcome to the April 7th meeting of the San Juan County Charter Review Commission. It is wonderful to see all these wonderful people here, including members of the public. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We're going to dive right into our agenda, and we're going to have a roll call, which will be done by our incredible, remarkable, just very special human being, Catherine Hanson, who's been staffing us and frankly getting everything done for us. So thank you, Catherine. Let's do it.
You're welcome. Okay, Sharon. Here. David Anderson.
Here.
Bill.
Here.
Janet.
Kevin, how much coffee have you had today?
I have had no caffeine in 21 years.
Okay, here.
Kyle.
Here.
And David Dellendorf is excused. Paul.
Here.
Jane. Patty.
Here.
Tony.
Present.
Richard.
Here.
Liz. Ta-da! Robert.
You're muted.
Bob. Yeah. Kevin.
Key.
Olivia.
Present.
Maureen.
Here.
Anne Marie.
Here.
And Tom. There he is.
Here.
There you go.
All right. So we have a couple absent. That's okay. Whatever their major issues were, we'll bring them up today and do them without them.
We need Jane here.
Yeah, we will need Jane here to present for that committee too. So this was the first time I have not called Catherine beforehand to go over the agenda just to refresh my memory and ask questions. And now I'm wishing I had. Catherine, can you remind me what the conversation on budget efficiencies was?
That was a carryover from last week where we quickly reviewed the budget, and with my hours having been so heavily front loaded, were there ways that we could reduce some of my work or other places in the budget?
And so did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, last week, I think I was down to 9.25 hours.
Yeah.
And this week is looking to be right around 10 again. It really depends on how readily I get those committee agendas and minutes and can get those posted to the website. Each of those takes a little bit of maneuvering with Civic Plus. But I think too, getting speakers scheduled there's Jane, has kind of slowed down. We've got people, I think, on the next 3 agendas. So that should help as far as my workload and the number of hours that I'm putting in.
Great. And
Does
so,
that help?
yeah, it does. Thank you. And so for the commission's sake, my thinking was, and I was hoping to get it done for this meeting, and it just hasn't happened. There's been too many other things regarding the commission and not enough time. But my plan is to come back with a bit of a proposal just so that everybody can get a sense of where we are in our budget. And I'll have that for next week. And what I would like to do is come forward and say, kind of, this is what we're anticipating for the remainder of our work. And these are the funds we have, and this is how we want to allocate them. So in addition to Catherine's time, we have funding we had hoped for bringing on someone also to help us begin drafting up the recommendations that we're going to be coming forward with. And so we hope that we have that budget still. We'll see. And so that's the number crunching that I will do over the next days. And for the next meeting, we will have a budget update on there so that the full commission can get a sense of that. Is that okay with folks?
Sounds great.
Okay. So let's go back to the March 31st minutes. Were there any questions on the minutes or additions or changes that anybody has? If not, I would accept a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion to
Moved.
adopt the minutes.
Okay, I got Bill and Olivia seconded.
I confirm the motion.
Thank you. I saw you there. I could read your lips. Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, the minutes are adopted. Okay, so we want to spend the bulk of the meeting today going through committee reports. And today, and sorry for the confusion on the agendas, Catherine and Olivia and I are all spinning 100 different directions. And so who I had spoken to was not who got back to Catherine. So who we're going to hear from today is the Climate and Environment Committee and the Justice and Equity Committee. We will hear from other committees going forward. I want to raise a couple points. And I also want to, several of you have had longer conversations with over the last few days. And I just want to thank you for the time you gave me and the reflection. So as far as the process going forward, my feeling, and please, I'm not throwing this out as the plan, I'm throwing this out as a suggestion. So please give me your input. My feeling is that we really need to start winding down the work of the subcommittees and having the subcommittees start coming to conclusions, which would be recommendations to the full commission. We also need to realize not everything's going to get out of the subcommittees, and I'll get to how we visit those subjects in a moment. But to put on a date on it, if we want to be completed by June, or early June, we'll say, we really need the subcommittees to be winding down in the next week, maximum, I would say 2 weeks, so that the commission can have the time to really thoroughly discuss the different recommendations, recognizing that there's a number of different committee discussions that are taking place that members of the commission are not on those subcommittees and will want to weigh in and have some discussion about those topics. So we need time for that. And so I would like to suggest that we plan on all recommendations being included by the subcommittees in the next 2 weeks. And I'm curious if folks feel if that's realistic. And if not, I'm obviously totally open for discussion. That also brings us to the next committee meetings. I would like to really make sure that the next 2 meetings are flushing out presentations from the committees that are ready to present. So this week I reached out to 2 chairs and spoke to them about presenting this week. If chairs feel they could present next week, I would like you to reach out to me and Olivia and Catherine and let us know. And if you're not able to present next week, let us know that you'll be able to present the following week. But I think it's really time for us to push that process so that we can begin moving into the enough discussion. Let's start. Because remember, for each of our different recommendations, we want to have findings and background on those. And so that's going to take some additional work, both from the subcommittees and maybe from the commission as a whole. So I'm curious what folks think about that. And then next I'll get into an idea I want to propose for issues that are in the subcommittee that the CRC the full commission wants to address. So first, just on that timeline and that idea that I just threw out, the folks have thoughts on that?
I think it's great.
Bob, please, and Maureen.
I think it's quite appropriate and also very extremely problematic for the process committee, at least. We had 2 jobs, which was to do a preamble and then to do Bill of Rights. We had some other jobs that were taken care of and kind of moved out. But we finished after weeks working on the preamble. We finished that finally last meeting, which was yesterday. And we have in the background been working on the Bill of Rights, but it's going to be, my committee is, shall we say, quite deliberative. They like to go over things and again and the third time. And I risk really being a bulldozer, trying to get people to come off the schneid, to be honest. These are people who are using their brains and trying to come up with the best solutions. And it's really tough, Kevin, I'll tell you. We will do our best.
Bob,
You go ahead.
Question / clarification of my point. when a committee presents, you don't necessarily have to be completely finished with your deliberations or exactly kind of on the Bill of Rights, for instance. You don't have to have it written up. What we want to know is you're doing a Bill of Rights and here's the ideas that are in that.
Oh, yeah.
And so you could present that and then we could give you some feedback that may actually help you finalize that Bill of Rights for the final discussion before the full commission. And so I see that as part of the findings work as well.
Mhm.
So for instance, one of the presentations you're going to hear today, we don't have all of the detail worked out on the Climate Environment Committee of what the background behind the recommendations we're going to have will be, but we do know the direction we're heading and what we've decided. So,
Yeah, Kevin, given that, we can certainly present in a week or in 2 weeks where we are on it. I can't say that we would be able to hand the full commission a piece of paper that's got our proposed Bill of Rights on it.
okay. And we'll continue to push you on that, of course, but
Yes, please.
yeah. But I appreciate that. And I will also say that for next week, we're looking at tentatively having operations and then elected versus appointed present, and maybe a third if we can be efficient enough. So other thoughts, Maureen? I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that elected I'm on elected and operations, and I think 2 weeks is absolutely reasonable. Not only that, I think it's essential because May is going to be a busy month trying to assimilate all of our thoughts, what we want to promote, what's going to be on an actual proposal to the public. So I don't see that we have any wiggle room here at all. So I'm ready to go with elected next week. We have a couple of items that are dangling, but they'll get ready. And what I've been doing, I mentioned this to you briefly, I set up our task list on sheets of paper, one item per sheet, and I have all of our motions and some of our discussions and some of the findings. So I'm going to get that out to the full commission prior to our presentation so that you can see in advance what we're doing, what we've done, and you'll be ready to give me questions or all of us questions. So that's good. Operations somewhat the same. We have a couple of items still pending there, but yes, let's go. Let's do it.
And the other thing I'd like to ask of everybody is that we all do our homework. So when we get information from a committee, we try and read it before the commission meeting instead of rehashing what's already been sent to us on and email or what have you. Any other comments on that plan? And if not, we'll just say that that's how we're going to move forward. Kyle, please. Oh, and Jane, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's sort of an implied phase 2 where we are doing the work of the findings. Is there a concept of when that will wrap up in your mind, time-wise?
I would look to others who have been on commissions previous to this one, but my thinking, looking at the timeline for when we want to get this to the county council, is that by mid-May, we would have the findings concluded and be solely focused on any finalization of the drafting of the actual recommendations. And I would say maybe even by the end of the first week of May in that period. So like say that by May 10th, you know, that we're along that road. And again, if others have suggestions or input on that, please let me know. Kyle, and then, Jane, and then Olivia.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I just on the timeline, I think it is also going to be helpful to reflect with the fuller commission on where our ideas are at to get a sense of how quickly we can wrap, so to speak. Now, I admittedly, and I think my fellow commissioners on the process committee have heard me talk a little bit about this, but for our Justice and Equity Committee, it's a bit confusing having a process committee work on a Bill of Rights and us not have any dialogue with them as another committee. So there's going to be some stuff we bump up against in terms of trying to find closure for all of our work. So I'm just putting that out there because I think we need to listen very carefully to each other's presentations and think about the implications of other committee work for our committee's work and how it all wraps together, if you will.
Excellent. And
That's
I've
just
got
all I wanted
Olivia
to
and then
offer.
Bob. I'd like to say something though in response to that, Jane, which is if chairs from other committees where you feel like you're overlapping would be willing to, if the numbers allow, sit in on the other committee. I think that would be really helpful. And then making sure that the chairs are speaking too, so that we don't want to end up with two versions of the same idea coming to the full commission. So if you guys in between your committees can start to have, and I know you already are, but really push that conversation, I think that would be helpful. So we've got Olivia and then Bob.
Thank you. I just was thinking about, how the next couple months are going to go, and if the expectation is that our committees are going to be wrapping up within the next 2 weeks. After that, a question came to my mind of, are we going to need extended time as a full commission, and what that's going to look like?
So two things. I think I said this and I didn't mean it exactly the way it came out. I'm not saying that the committees would wrap up. I'm saying that maybe the committees would shift in the work that they're doing from discussing and coming up with your recommendations to a fact finding and background information supporting those recommendations. So it's kind of a shift. So I think the committees will still be meeting to do that work. And I think probably necessary to keep meeting and doing that work. We may find that there are more issues that need to be discussed by the full commission or recommendations from committees that need to be discussed. And if we need more time, we can address that. At this point, I've not scheduled it. I'm waiting to see kind of what's coming up from the commissions. Does that address it, Olivia? Thank you. Bob.
I just wanted to ask, to say something to Jane. Jane, the process committee right now is very small. I view it to be too small. We have a total of 5 people, including myself on the committee. And it would be, I would love it if someone from your committee could come over and be actually on the process committee for the rest of its deliberations and bring back what we do to you in that regard. I would really like another member or two.
Sharon.
Yeah, Bob, would you remind us when the process committee is meeting? Sorry.
Process committee meets on Tuesday morning from 10:30 until noon, an hour and a half. So we just met yesterday.
Okay. So I'm encouraged by this dialogue. I think that we are getting a better sense of how we're going forward. I think we're doing okay on time. I think we are tight on what needs to be accomplished, but I'm not in crisis mode over that. I think that we're okay. We just need to stay focused. The other issue, if I can transition, that I wanted to bring up is how we deal with subjects that either die in a committee or are approved in a committee where members of the commission feel otherwise. And my suggestion is a couplefold. First of all, so next week we're going to have a presentation on ranked choice voting, and that died in the committee. The reason, and we discussed this last week, but I just want to raise it again. The reason I feel it's appropriate for us to have a full commission discussion about that to a lesser extent is because some of you asked for it. More powerful for me, however, is that several members of the public in our town halls asked for it. And so because it was something that was one of the more vocal issues that one of the issues that we heard the most about during our town halls, I think it's appropriate to have a full commission meeting on it. I do not have any other, 0 subjects that aren't already being addressed by subcommittees or the full commission that were raised in the town halls, at least to that level. Maybe something got 1 comment, but not, a dozen or more. And so for the matters that will come from committee, for the issues that will come from committee, where somebody on the commission wants it dealt with, but the commission didn't deal with it, I think to make sure that we're using our time efficiently, that there be enough support on the full commission to bring that back up. So we have the unique outlier with ranked choice voting because of the public input during our town halls. But what I wanted to throw out was that let's throw out a scenario. If a subcommittee kills a subject that you're really passionate about, I feel like it's not okay to just raise that as a large agenda item that we're going to be discussing for the full CRC after the subcommittee's dealt with it, unless there are a number of commissioners who want that discussion to take place. I don't feel that I unilaterally should make that decision, and I don't think another commissioner should. I also, however, am torn. I don't necessarily believe it needs to be a majority of the commission. I don't think 10 commissioners need to say, I want to hear something. But if, and I'm hoping we can be loose on this, but if, 5 or 7 or something people say, that was really important to me, can we have a discussion? Then I think the full commission can say yes or no, we want to have that discussion. But I'm concerned that issues that are, thoughtfully considered in a committee, but die in the committee, not continue to come back up for the commission and take a lot of our time. The other scenario is the opposite of that, which is something comes from a commission as a recommendation and the commission as a whole, or members of the commission don't feel that they support it. When the committee reports take place, like what's going to happen today, is your time to raise your concern or your support for an issue. And then if there's a majority of or at least a good portion of the commission opposing a subject, we can have more discussion on that. So any ideas or thoughts on that? I see Dick and then Jane.
I mentioned this, I think, last week, but I think it's absolutely necessary that the issues that got majority support in a committee, because that means a subset of the commission has spent some time debating this, that those issues plus the ranked choice voting, and I accept your reasoning behind that, those have to be at the top of the list. Anything that a group of, like you said, 5 or 6 or 7 commissioners want to resurrect that died in a committee, I think has to come after those other things that have already been discussed.
I heard you last week saying that, and I actually appreciated it last week, and I appreciate this week. I shared with somebody I had a conversation with today that in Olympia, this can happen where something gets resurrected. We used to call them zombie bills, and nobody likes them because, if you had a thoughtful debate on something and it died, and then it comes back, it's like, how many times is this thing going to come back to life? So Jane.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification in terms of what happened in the elections committee group, I mean, it died there not because there weren't a number of us that supported ranked choice voting. It died there on the basis of the information we obtained from the presentation that was, or not presentation, the discussion we had with Mylene present with us, which was very helpful. And also with Camelin of her office, of the elections office as well. It was very good to hear from them. I think, and my fellow committee members on the elections committee can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we didn't feel we could pass a motion that supported ranked choice voting being put into the charter as an amendment. We weren't there, and so it could have been the way the motion was worded, I don't know, but I mean, I felt we needed to hear the other side of the story, or a different side of the story, which is from Fair Vote Washington, which is why I proposed that we have that presentation. And also, absolutely, I heard the same thing in the town hall, a lot of interest, and then certainly there was opposition in some of the emails we got. So it's a hot topic, and but I think if we had put our hands up, it might have had like an even vote or possibly more in favor of ranked choice voting, just maybe not necessarily at this moment in time. But yeah, so I'm glad consideration can still be taken from some issues that the committee doesn't feel equipped to continue to deliberate on, and feels are better put to the full commission.
Excellent. Thank you. And I would say, just for others, I see a lot of hands going up. I don't want to get into a discussion of ranked choice voting right now. We can have that discussion next week. So I've got Olivia, Tom, and then Tony.
Thank you. I think discussed this last week with you, Kevin, and then I know that I brought it up to the full commission as well in our last meeting. My understanding of how each committee was going to present their findings was that the lead was going to share their screen and go through the data that they had compiled. So, when they met and their committee voted to, move this subject forward. And then what we can do is compile, a list of the hot topics essentially from each committee, so we can then discuss as a full commission to move forward. So I'm hoping that each committee lead understands that there does need to be, a paper trail of your meetings and, what you want to move forward. I'm pretty sure we've communicated that expectation a couple different times. But my hope is that, when you do that presentation of your findings, that we can clearly see, is the full commission, approving this or not, and if we can move things forward in a timely fashion.
Thank you. Tom and Tony and Bob, and then I'd like to try and move us into committee presentations.
Kevin, last week you mentioned that you were inviting a speaker to address the full CRC on ranked choice voting. This seems very peculiar to me, since a proposal for RCV failed to pass out of the elections committee. It has been my understanding that our committee structure was established to propose and study charter topics for presentation and consideration by the full CRC. It is the long-standing rule that our Congress and legislatures have this same procedure, and unfortunately, some proposals just die in committee for lack of support. We have a mountain of work yet to do in the main CRC. Adding this additional presentation to our group does not seem like the best use of our time. I'm hoping you will consider this and not add this already considered subject to the agenda of the full CRC. This is a letter that I wrote Kevin the other day.
Yeah, and Tom, I believe I replied to you and the full commission on that letter too. I won't read verbatim what I wrote to you, but I will recap what I said earlier, which is, I think there's a very unique situation because there were a number of issues that we heard a lot of input on during our town halls, but the only one that wasn't being already thoroughly vetted was ranked choice voting. And so I believe that in that unique situation, it's important. And there was also several commissioners who were not on your committee and didn't get to take part in that discussion, but heard from their constituents that they needed to pay attention to this and have a discussion about that. And they haven't had that opportunity. And so that's why I've scheduled it. I've also spoken to another member of the commission about trying to make sure that we have a thoughtful presentation next week on both sides of the issue. I have reached out to people trying to find anybody opposed. I have not. Paul and some others may have some suggestions that we'll be following up on. But this is a unique situation, as I said. It's the only subject we heard from in our town hall that wasn't already getting active discussion with the full commission and a subcommittee. So that was why there's an exception. And I will also say, as I said to you in my email, that both in Congress and in the state legislature, this can happen. It's extremely rare that it does, but I know of 3 bills that greatly benefited San Juan County that were dead in the House until I went and talked to the speaker, and they had died in committee, and then they just popped up on the House floor and passed. So it can happen. I don't recommend it, and I do not see another scenario this entire work process where this is going to happen. Our next town halls are going to be at the end of our work where we're presenting our findings so people can give input on them. So unless 50 people show up for public input at a meeting and say, I really want you to dive in on this subject and it's a brand new subject, I don't see this happening again. So that was my rationale. I have Tom, and Tom, go ahead.
Just to follow up, I think you should at least put it to the vote of the CRC, whether those kinds of things are going to be entertained.
So thank you for that. Last week I said exactly what I said just now, or not exactly, but pretty much. And I got a lot of nods from people, and that is why I proposed to put it forward on the agenda. I was even talking about maybe doing it this week, and then Dick and some others said, we should wait. So we bumped it back a little. But that was my reason for raising it last week. And I did not have anybody tell me, please don't put this back on the agenda. What I got was some nods and also members of your committee saying that we discussed this. But I had others saying what Jane just said earlier, which is I would like to have a more thoughtful conversation about this. So that's what I went ahead and did. So no, I did not call for a vote, but I did bring it to the full commission's attention that that's what I was thinking about and believed that I had the commission understanding that. So I've got Tony and then Bob and then Paul. And again, next week's going to be ranked choice voting. So if it's about the process, great, but we can get into the ranked choice voting more next week, hopefully. Tony, Bob, and then Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to talk about ranked voice choice voting or any particular item. I just, in general, as a process for this group, we have 6 or 7 subcommittees. If each subcommittee is going to promote 1, 2, maybe 3 items for the larger discussion of the CRC, it would seem to me that back to what Dick mentioned earlier, Dick's point is that we should have the top 2 or 3 of each committee move to the top of the list. It would seem to me that we could have easily 15, 16 items that we're going to be talking about and discussing in detail, because some of those items will eventually move forward to be recommendations by the CRC to go to the voters in November. So I'm just caution everybody that we don't have a lot of time to deal with additional information about items that could be important or could not be important. I don't know. I'm not on any side of any issue that deals with ranked choice voting or any other item that is not coming from the subcommittee to the larger group. So having said all that, it seems to me that we have a lot of work to do, and we're spending a lot of time on items that we can discuss, but I would suggest what Dick said earlier would be something that we should abide by, is that have the top 2 or 3 items from each subcommittee go forward. And if there's room, maybe add RCV. And then if there is more room, we can add other items that could come up from other places. So we have a lot of work to do yet, and we don't have that much time.
Thank you. And as I said, I fully appreciated what Richard said last week and how he reiterated it again this week. I think that is correct. Although I would not say that it's the top 2 or 3. I think they're going to put forward recommendations, the subcommittees, and we're going to listen to those recommendations. If it's 1 or 6, we will have to whittle it down. Dick's point that was very important to me is that if there are subjects that died in a committee and we want to take action on those will be at the bottom of the list and coming up later in our process when we can get to them. And for me, that would also include ranked choice voting. I'm not calling for action next week. I'm asking that we have a thoughtful educational process for ourselves, and then we see where it is. Bob and then Paul, and then somebody else maybe. But we really do have to move on. We're already cutting into the time of the presentations. So I'm going to say Bob and then Paul, and then let's cut it off, please, unless somebody really is dying to speak. So Bob, please.
I just wanted to bring up for a moment the concept of minority reports and whether or not it would be useful to have a minority report. I don't know about the other committees, but my committee is striving for unanimity, but I can see the possibility that we wouldn't reach it. And would the commission want, if a vote was say 3-2, would the commission want a minority report from the group of people who felt the other way? And the second part of this is, are we going to have minority reports from the commission itself when it comes time to put out our voters pamphlet, and there's a 4, and the commission is for it? Are there going to be people from the commission who are against it, who are going to write up an against, or someone from the community is offered the opportunity to write up an against and go into that pamphlet?
2 things. One is we are all independently elected. And so if any of us chooses to write a minority report, either on a subcommittee or on the commission as a whole, they can do so. The second thing is there will be on the ballot, I believe Mylene's with us, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the ballot will have a pro and con statement for each of the questions that we put forward. And so if somebody on the commission chose to be the person who wrote the con statement, they would have the absolute freedom to do so.
Kevin, do they have to search, do the people putting it together have to search out until they find somebody who's a con if we don't offer them one?
I believe so. Mylene?
Yes, if I could clarify, I guess that the Charter Review Commission itself will want to select its own pro committees. That would be my expectation. Technically, the council would be the authorizing agency for these proposals, and they could appoint them, but they would look to you to appoint your pros. Normally, I am the one who selects cons, mostly by advertising for them. Many things don't have cons. My guess is these kind of issues, it won't be difficult to find cons. If there are members of the commission,
A lot.
no, I mean, the last Charter Review Commissions had cons, because this is something that involves everybody. It's not like, okay, who wants to write a con for the school measure? It's hard to get those people, but this kind of stuff we usually can. But if there are members of this commission who wish to write an argument against, they should contact me afterwards.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul?
Oh, yeah, Kevin, for next week's meeting, and we were talking about having maybe somebody who's representing Pierce County who went through this whole process. I can get in touch with that person. Could we also expect that on next Wednesday?
Yeah, that was my hope. So you and I spoke about this earlier. So if you get me the name, I can reach out and try and get them scheduled.
Okay,
That would be my hope.
thank you.
Okay, we're going to move forward if that's okay and get into the committee reports. And then we will stop for public comment promptly at 10 till 6, and we will adjourn at 6. And I will spend about 5 minutes if there's any new business just before that. So with that, if we could go into the Climate and Environment Committee report and hear what's been going on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to kind of bring everybody up to date on where we are. When we last visited with you, we shared that we had had a supermajority vote for an elected full-time position for someone that would be handling climate and environmental protection issues. We heard from several staff members and some of managers actually, and one person that was actually staff. And today we voted on a working title. We voted on a working title for the position and for the office, and we voted on a mission statement. These are all working titles, understanding that we're going to come back to you and want to hear from you and move our items forward. So we're talking about the Climate and Environment Commissioner, who's a full-time elected position. We're talking about it being an Office of Climate and Environment. And we're talking about the mission being to take, the mission of this office is to take urgent action to combat climate change and protect our environment. And going forward, next week, we're going to be looking a little bit more at the scope of responsibilities that would be handled by this person and office. And also, we're beginning to work on our findings. And we would really like to secure some time on the May 5th agenda to come forward and present to the commission. And then we would like to secure time on the agenda for May 19th to respond to any concerns that have been raised over the course of this. Thank you.
Catherine, you got those? Okay, any questions for Anne-Marie or for the Climate and Environment Committee? None? Okay, I see Janet and then Maureen and then Tony.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So this is a little bit of a question for you and for Bob. I think Bob. I know that the Nature Bill of Rights is being considered, and I'm just wondering if somehow, because you stated the mission statement is to combat climate change and preserve the, there's something about the environment.
Environmental protection.
Environmental protection. And I'm just wondering if we get to the Bill of Rights component, how that will dovetail with that, because it might be a prism through which we are looking at not only a lot of the charter changes, but also particularly for this new commission.
Well, my understanding from our conversations in our subcommittee or our committee, and also talking with the public, is that at this point in time, we feel that environmental protection will pretty much be an umbrella for our Nature Bill of Rights, and that those things would be encompassed in that discussion and in those positions. Yeah.
That was also my understanding, but I will say this, it was also, in addition, it was my understanding that that would not prohibit us, if my committee wanted to do this, would not prohibit us from referring to a concept of a rights of nature and putting that in our Bill of Rights. It would just not be something that was in the mission description, et cetera. And if we do that and we bring it up to the commission and the commission doesn't want it in there, then it's up to the commission. But I have a feeling it's going to be in there. I don't know how my committee will vote in that regard.
Janet, does that answer your question? Okay. Maureen.
Maureen and then Tony.
So I am a practical girl and I always have practical questions pretty much. I am concerned about how you're gonna.
I've drunk wine with you.
It's about how to pay for this position. I have been talking to a little bit to Bob, and I've talked to Anne Marie, and I suggested grants and all this other stuff, but I've become aware that grants will not pay for an elected position.
That's not true.
That's what I've learned.
That's not accurate.
Okay. Well, have you guys thought about avenues to pay for this? I'm sure you're thinking of everything.
Maureen, I just want to ask you a question.
Mhm.
Your roof is leaking and you have a septic issue. You prioritize things, don't you? That's what we're going to be asking the county council to help us do. We have to prioritize things. And if the people want the position, then we will prioritize it.
As far as, if I can respond, so there has been a lot of discussion about cost also. And I think several of the items being discussed by the commission will require funding. Most of them will. And so there are discussions going on about cost savings elsewhere. There are most definitely grants for the work that this elected official and others will be doing. As if, in fact, I've already heard from one major foundation who was extremely excited this discussion was going on. And so there's most definitely funding, and it's frankly, a lot of it is the same funding or similar funding to what we're already receiving for some of our natural resource programs. Keep in mind that a super majority of our natural resource work right now is paid for by grants in the county, and those same grants would pay for this department or this office. But I think you raise a good point, Maureen, and we need to be fiscally responsible as we're coming forward, and particularly tell the voters how things are going to be paid for. I think right now, to Anne Marie's point, the conversation is one of what are the priorities that need to be dealt with. And I think that's the first conversation. And then once the commission decides, yes, this is what we're doing, I think we need to have thoughtful conversations, not just about this position, but all the other recommendations and what the budgetary impacts are.
Yeah, we do. We have to have a lot of these conversations. I mean, there's a lot of ways to go with this. And when it can start and all those things. I'll wait for, I have a lot of questions, but I'll hold them back. You go ahead now. I have a lot of
We'll come back to you in a bit. So I have Tony and then Bob and then Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. One of the questions is that position going to be they're going to have enforcement capability or just an advisory position? That's the first question. And the second question, did you consider an appointed position, since that if it's such an important place to go forward with, should we not be searching out, far and wide to get that kind of a position filled? Bob?
So a couple different things are two levels there. The first one was your question about, give it to me again.
Enforcement or advisory?
Oh,
How strong will the position be?
well, right now we're actually looking at, another stream that deals with what the authority can be. But we've also talked about the fact that it would be an executive position. And you would still have the San Juan County Council that would have their legislative position and their budget position, just like they do with the other elected officials. So this person would be bringing policy proposals to the San Juan County Council. They would be taking the fire that their actions may cause from the county council so that those positions would be somewhat protected. And at the same time, the county council would share in the victories as we move forward in the protection of our climate and also our environment. Your second question was, give it to me again.
Let me follow up on the first question for a second. So the current prosecuting attorney has full power to prosecute problems and wrongs. They don't have to check with anybody. Why would this position be different if they have an authority to protect the environment? Why would they have to respond to somebody else for any direction?
I saw Kevin and Bob seemed like they both wanted to respond, so I'll let them go and then come back.
So Tony, I was just going to say, I've spent a lot of time researching this. What I will say is the subcommittee's discussion has been that we want to make this as strong as possible and give them the autonomy to do the job. And we are researching legally how that can work. And so there's not an answer for you right now on exactly how that will work, but it will be an independently elected official if it passes the voters' will. It would be an independently elected official that would have the autonomy of an independent elected official. And through the executive actions of that branch, we are looking at how and what may be possible. And so it'll obviously have to be within the law. There's some stuff that is statutorily guaranteed to our legislative body, in our case, our county council. So that won't be changed. But there are other areas where we have the ability to strengthen the position. We don't have the detail on that now, but we're doing our research and pretty extensive research.
And Bob, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the prosecutor position is a state position. This position will be a county position, and all of the legislative authority is in the county council, all of it. The executive power for this particular area will be in this individual, and I hope that person will be a powerful executive, but that doesn't mean he can make law. It just means he can execute what law he is given. Now he or she, of course, she can go to the council and thank you for reminding me. She can go to the council and ask for certain ordinances to be passed. But until they are, I think would be somewhat limited in what that person could do by fiat.
And we like to think about it in terms of the Department of Natural Resources and how the executive there is actually elected and they have responsibilities and they have certain authorities and they go to the legislature for the passage of legislation and they go to the legislature and the governor for their budget. That's how we're thinking about that. That's kind of the track we're on. At the same time, we would like this position to have some enforcement authority because what we have heard in all of our committee meetings from the public is that enforcement is a very, very serious problem.
The second question from Tony was, have we discussed appointed versus elected and how we came to elected if it's such a strong position?
Right, and that has to do a little bit with what I just was leading into, which has to do with the DNR position versus the Fish and Wildlife position for the state or the state parks position where there are commissioners that are appointed by the governor that then appoint a person. All of that goes through those people before they can go to the legislature or the governor. So our desire is to have this person be able to go to the county council and make recommendations, just like Mylene does, or just like the assessor does, or the treasurer does, and have them have the authority and the clout that the county council is paying attention to them, because they know that not just are they elected, but they have the authority and they have a strong group of people that are behind them supporting them. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. There's a
And it
lot of,
looks like Dick wants to say something.
thank you, a lot more questions, but they'll be in time. I have to wrap my head around this process. So thank you.
Please do.
I've got a couple things to add in on there, but I've got Bob, Jane, Bill, Dick.
Kevin, I think Jane was before me, actually. I think she had her hand up before me.
Jane, please.
Thank you, Kevin, or Mr. Chair. I think this is great. You guys are clearly doing a lot of hard work on this and hard research. I think I take note of Maureen's comment about, you know, funds to pay for this, and then listening to Kevin talk about the potential for grant funding of this kind of position. And you all may or may not remember, but I was one of the folks who raised earlier on the importance of fiscal responsibility in our deliberations, because if we don't want something to be completely shot down, then we do need to do some homework in terms of, you know, how something could feasibly be funded. So it was nice to hear what Kevin was saying about the possibility of there being considerable grant opportunities to finance such a position. And I think you guys may want to, before coming back to us with a fulsome presentation of your findings, I think it would serve you well to get a little more detail on that.
And Jane, you know, from what we've already seen in the materials that have been coming out of the elected and appointed committee, that appointed positions cost more for the county than elected positions. So
Yeah.
this position would cost less than an appointed position.
Well, yeah, and so for me,
Oh,
I'm
no.
not deliberating on that point. That wasn't my point. My point was simply that if there's money available to fund such a position, then it sort of behooves the committee to let us know what you've done in the way of research for that, because that will make it easier for us to deliberate on it as well. And so I think that would just be not a bad way to go. The other thing I wanted to ask or raise or suggest is that as we heard from one of the previous presentations, I think it was from the county manager, I'm not sure, or maybe it was your committee that looked into this. But often, you know, people who are working on chipping away on environment stuff within the county government get railroaded by, say, public works or whatever, right? And so I'm wondering if you guys have had a chance to find out, how does an office like this, an elected position like this, deal with the blowback that inevitably they will face when sort of competing for budgetary funds or something year in, year out against other departments and rather large and powerful departments like public works. So I'm just wondering if you guys have contemplated that a little bit in some of the research that you've done. Yeah. So, but good work, and I really look forward to your presentation of findings. So it's really exciting what you guys have been doing.
Bob, and then Bill, and then Dick, and then I'd like to add something.
I just wanted to say that I am certainly going to be suggesting in this committee that it be a major component of what this department does to seek the kind of fundraising that the funds from folks, foundations, people in the business of doing this, that they go out and do that, because it is my general perception that this will be a hot issue, that this will be a hot position, that we will be in if we put it in there and make it powerful enough, that it will be a focus, and there will be foundations that will be competing to fund us. I don't know that. That's just my kind of general feeling. I couldn't tell you which foundations right now, but just generally in my reading, et cetera, that's what I think. And I'm going to be asking that the committee include that as a major thing that someone in that department is responsible for.
Great. I've got Bill, Dick, I have myself, and then Liz, and I'll bump myself after Liz. Bill, you're muted.
As a former ED of a foundation in Seattle, I have to recommend some caution on this other people's money program that we're starting. When you're dealing with a foundation, they love starting a new idea, and you'll get enthusiasm from them. It's a good idea. They want to see it started. But foundations do not generally support things in future years. You can't say, well, we'll get, no, we were lucky at the EDC, the foundation I ran, for getting a 2-year grant. But that's rare. You get your first year, you report back, and they say, thank you. And you say more, and they say, if you can't sell it to anyone else, now you sell it to someone else, or you get your own backing. And so I think what this is going to devolve into, from my experience in watching this and evaluating these things and being on the board of a foundation, the only thing that happens is after a while you run out of the grants. You've run out your string. You're not new anymore. You've been there 3 years, 4 years, and there's no more money. At that point, and well before that point, you'll be playing a zero-sum game with the county budget. And that's, if it isn't that from the beginning, it's going to be that eventually. That's the first point I want to make. The second point is people talk about power. Now, be very careful. Randy was careful to tell us about the 1,000 Friends case that says we don't have the power to grant that power. We have to do it differently. I do think that the election of such an official is great, because that official isn't going to end up with any more than moral power, which is powerful in itself. I'm not knocking it. But I think they're out there when we say we want to give the people what they want. We may be trying to give them something we can't give. And I really would like to see the legal work behind this. Washington law, not somebody from Kansas who thinks this is a great idea, but somebody whose practice is here and knows the case and knows the business. And I would say for any power or enforcement powers that is granted to this official, I think the full commission ought to see what the backup is.
Well, the full commission will have to see it before it's voted upon. So, and I will wait. I will reserve. I'm going to make some comments in a bit. I've got Dick and then Liz.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to Tony's second question or comment about appointed versus elected and say, Tony, I started this whole process with the general feeling that appointed positions are better than elected, because particularly in this small county, it gives you access to a much wider pool of people and a lot more expertise and experience. But I've come around to the point of view that particularly on this position, that having it appointed is analogous to the deputy public works director being in charge of that, of public works, or deputy in charge of public works, and then the environmental area. It's a no-win situation. I think the position has to be elected, even though it gives us a smaller group of people. I have kind of the same response, not necessarily as strongly, to the financial and budgetary issue. I started feeling very strongly, we need to come up with an option for at least partial funding of this. It's one of the reasons I've been so strong on consolidating the treasurer with the assessor or the auditor. I backed off on that a little because I think we're at a point where we don't have the whole budget picture. None of us does. And there have been people who've argued, look, it's the council's job. If this is public says it's the priority, it's the council's job to figure out how to fund it. And that's the way I'm leaning now on that as well.
Well, and just spinning off of that, I would say, when is it going to be a priority? Tourists come here for the environment. We moved here, all of us probably, for the environment. When is it going to be a priority? When all the trees are gone? When we're all at sea level? When is it going to be a priority, folks?
So I've got Liz and then Dave and then me.
My hope is that this body has both the courage and the capacity to be part of moving the conversation away from how are we going to pay for it, to the recklessness, the economic recklessness of not doing some of the things that we're proposing. We are looking at catastrophic destruction to the place where we live. And part of our economic engine is run by the beauty we're attempting to protect. So I just hope that we as a body find a way to help shift the conversation to how reckless it is to not do these things, the economic impact of not doing them. So instead of trying to prove that there's money there to do it, to look at the impact of what happens when we don't do this. What happens when we don't act now? With that, I'm done.
Okay, Dave Anderson.
Thank you. I hear that there's a lot of hinging on the power of the council to approve everything that this commissioner is going to do. And I'm just sitting here thinking, what if instead of couching this position on the executive branch as a commissioner, what if we couched it on the council? And to avoid to not step on a third rail here, but what if we actually expanded the council and and we've talked about the idea of a lens in terms of like each counselor they're voted countywide, but they look at the lens of the district they sit in. Why don't we have a council person who's elected to look at the environmental and climate change lens? And that way it'd be easier to fund, it'd be countywide elected, and they'd have a context in terms of the kind of position it is. It would be a council person, but focused on the environment. And then it clearly would have, that person would clearly have the teeth, the power of the pocketbook, and be able to have access to the entire county's government and public works and things like that. And it also free up our council to have more conversation amongst each other and be a more powerful council with, or if we could find another issue that's we're really passionate about, have another council person who has a specific lens that they are charged to be elected by. Just an idea.
Okay. Others? Okay, I have a couple comments, if I may. One is, Bill, I wanted to circle back, and I was holding up when you were speaking my notes. So what I wrote in yellow and then circled in red, which in my notes means it's really important, is grants fund work, not positions. And so I have 22 years experience working for foundations, everybody from Pew Charitable Trust and Packard, or consulting for them, or getting big bucks from them. So I have a lot of experience here as well. And what I would say is there is, I believe, decades worth of funding for the environmental and climate work that a department like this, that an office like this could do. You would never write a proposal that says, I want to fund an elected position. You would write a proposal saying, we're going to do this incredible climate work and we'd like you to help fund it. And 10% of this staff person and 50% of this staff person and 7% of that staff person are all going to be under this grant. And that happens. And I have no doubt in my mind that there's significant funding out there for a long period of time from different foundations, because to Bill's point, he is correct. You usually can't go to the same gift horse 10 times and often not even 2 times. My thought is that the county citizens need to prioritize this. And if they do so at the ballot, it's the county's responsibility to make sure that we're funding it. And I believe it is our responsibility as commissioners to come up with good ideas of how we're funding it. And I would not say that what we should do is go out and say, we're going to find grant funding.
Yeah.
That is not an option that we go forward with. What we go forward with is we say, here's some cost savings that we found through our decisions, and here's some expenses. And we believe that if you adopt our package that we're putting forward, it's going to be revenue neutral. Or if it's going to have a cost, we are honest about that. And we say it's going to have a cost. And here's what we believe that could be. And then we say, and we believe that's justified because this priority is so great. The other thing I would say is there are cost savings, dramatic cost savings through climate actions. One of which that was brought to our attention is, I can't remember, I think it was $161,000 a year or something.
$190,000 when we moved to electric vehicles.
And that wasn't the entire fleet. That was the majority of the fleet. So, I mean, there's decisions that you can start to make. So instead of buying new SUVs every time we need a new car, if we went to an EV, which is totally practical, I think it's important. The other thing I was going to say is on the appointed versus elected. I really went round and round on this, but from experiences that I've had personally and the long list of stories we've heard from staff, from electeds, from appointeds, if something is going to get done, this has to be an independently elected official. And it was brought up earlier, I think Anne-Marie raised it. There is a ton of data out there that will show you. And we actually heard from our current, was it our treasurer or our auditor? I can't remember who said that, you know, their staff is making more than they are, but they're happy to do it because they get to be the elected official. You will get an elected official for significantly less than you will get an appointed. If you are advertising this position, you are somewhere in the $150,000 to $170,000 range, and then you've got benefits on top of that. If you want an elected, my recommendation today would be that this person's salary is pegged at the same level as the other elected officials. So you're in the, say, 80K range. So with benefits, you're at somewhere around 120. So it's less money. That said, I think it's very important for us to be fiscally responsible, but the autonomy of the elected official is critical. I don't think a county council member can prioritize everything because they've got a lot of other things they have to do. And I think if you have an independently elected official whose sole purpose is this, is where we actually start to see action. And the final thing I will say is there's significant legal research that needs to be done on how this position can be stronger or not as strong as we may hope. And that, yes, Bill, has to be by somebody who actually understands Washington law and our Constitution and our county obligations and so on. And that will be done. And if it's not done, we're not going to have a very strong position because we're not going to be able to make the straight-faced argument. So I have Maureen has a hand up, and then we are right at time to move to the next committee. Oh, and Jane, sorry, we'll go Maureen and then Jane.
Just want to say one thing. I'm a practical girl. I like to think practically, but one of the things that occur to me, and I've mentioned it to Bob and to Anne-Marie, it's the strength in the presentation of this and the credibility of the charter review. If we put a slate of citizens, maybe some of them are right here on this commission, alongside of this proposal, I think it's a stronger way to guide this through. Those are the people that would help develop this in the first 3 to 6 months of passage by the voters. But we can't just pass a person into our current government and expect it to fly. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Actually, I don't.
I think that we need to put a slate of citizens as part of this position so that they can do the legwork to make sure that this happens. Somewhat like, okay.
She'd like to have elected commissioners appoint the position.
A slate, not individual, pick them as we vote them, a slate of people to accompany this proposal to see it through. And otherwise, to help establish the credibility of it.
Maureen, I think the error in that this would be, so it would be, as I understood the conversation with you, it would be elected commissioners who would then appoint the position. And
No,
what,
this is different. This is different.
okay,
I'm just saying you want an elected person, fine. But I think to protect this, to make this position workable and something that the county can see through is to put this group of people that are going to help develop this position. I don't think we're going to get this done by June or July.
oh
And
yeah, we
it-
are.
I think we are.
Are
We
you
are,
sure?
we are, Maureen. We're
I
coming
don't
at
see
you.
how that's going to happen.
We're coming at you.
Everybody, I see hands. I've got Paul, I've got Bob. I'll get to you guys in one sec. The one thing I wanted to say that wasn't brought up in the beginning, Maureen, is one of the other conversations that's happened in the subcommittee is the idea of a kind of a committee, a citizens committee that would oversee or advise this office and the position. And so I think that starts to get at what you're talking about. That would be there as well, because I think you've got to have citizen input on this ongoing.
Gotta have it. Gotta have it.
It can't just be in the beginning.
We have included that.
Yeah, so I've got Jane
I don't
and
need
I've got Olivia, and then I've got Paul, and then I think I've got Bob, and then we have to move on if we can.
Mr. Chair, a point of order, please. I am I'm meant to do a justice and equity presentation
Yeah.
next, and the time is really cutting short. And I think
Thank
there's been fulsome discussion about this. It sounds like your committee has got good work. It's going on. You've got some feedback. We could take the rest of the meeting to talk about this. So I'd like to just ask that we be able to move on. And I did you started calling all these other names. That's why I felt I had to say that.
Yeah,
But
no, I appreciate that.
the
I'm
other thing I just wanted to say was I respect what Liz Lafferty, the intervention she made. Liz is good at looking, bigger sometimes and helping us to remember that there's some fundamental reasons this is being advocated by this, not advocated, wrong word. This is being explored and developed as a concept by this committee. And so I think, those you're talking to about your findings do need to understand and appreciate the consequences of not doing this more fully. And so people raise issues of fiscal responsibility just because we do need to be prudent in that regard. We also do need to care about the future. So I hope that in the next presentation, you guys can elaborate a little bit on the what are the consequences of not doing anything, because that's very compelling. And I don't begin to say I know those, but I appreciate what you're all doing. So
And I second Jane's request to move on to justice and equity. We could beat this all night.
I've tried 3 times. So right now I've got Olivia, Bob, and Paul. Could you guys hold off and wait?
I withdraw my question.
I
Paul,
lowered my hand.
okay, Paul.
Well, it's an issue about financing, and I could share just a little bit about that.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So we're talking about maybe having this come on board, and we're going to kind of crowd it in. It says if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it. We don't have any way of funding it. So I'm just going to throw out that I've seen this happen other places, and being a tax assessor, I'm understanding how that works. But if you float it along with this proposition, and it flies, and along a partner proposition would be to the taxpayer, the election would also approve of, let's say, a dime per assessed thousand. That would raise almost $1,200,000. So if that is something you're looking for, how you're going to pay for it, then it seems to me that if the people vote for the actual department, then they should also vote for the way they're going to finance it.
Thank you.
That's a good idea.
Okay, I'd like to move on.
Good idea.
I'd like to move on to the next committee if I can, since we're now over time on that, and I want to give ample time to that discussion in that committee. So if we can turn it over.
Thank you.
Can I get screen share capability, or do I have it all already?
I don't know.
Okay.
You probably have it, Jane, just click it and see.
Yeah, you should have it already, Jane.
Okay, let's give it a shot. Can you see this?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Because I know you guys are all about to start snoozing, so I thought I'd put some little color on the screen for you. And grab your spectacles if you need to look for text. I tried to bold stuff enough so you could all see it. So, so this is going to be a very brief, and I mean probably about a 10-minute overview of where we're at, because I would really like to get some feedback and hear some thoughts and ideas on what we're currently deliberating. And I would ask my fellow committee members, and that is Kyle and Kevin and Sharon, to add in or on to this presentation by weighing in on any questions and issues the rest of you raise. So, because I literally put this together in about 15 minutes, so I apologize for its rather compressed and rough presentation. Okay, so first off, issues under consideration. This is taken from the spreadsheet of issues that were put to our committee to explore. So this comes from what originally was proposed when we were still a full commission deliberating on various issues. So there are 3 added at the bottom. So you can see there are 10. In our last meeting on Monday, we pushed ourselves forward to determine how might we want to move ahead. Do we want to move ahead on any of these issues, and or are others going to be taken off or what have you? So what I've got on the right side of this spreadsheet is where we are at on each of these issues as of Monday. And we made some very good progress on Monday. Just so you know, the bottom 3 issues are issues that were raised in the town hall that were sort of, notionally given to us to consider. So the first 2 issues are the ones that are definitely ones we want to more deeply explore. And we've been deliberating in the last few weeks on how we want to go about exploring those issues and how the charter may be amended to give those issues some attention. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the first one, though, is the idea, Kevin's original idea of the creation of an independent citizens law and justice oversight committee. The second issue is a bit broader, and it's sort of posed as a question in a way, and that is the charter and the current structure of the local government going to be able to serve our county effectively in the future in terms of having respect for the equal and equitable rights of all, regardless of sex, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic class, and ability. I'll speak in a moment to how we are thinking about that issue. The next issue is an issue put forward by Kyle in our original group: deepen, broaden incorporation of Indigenous Native values, perspectives, problem solving in county structure. So those 3 issues we voted on in our committee on Monday unanimously to bring these issues to the full commission once we've done further research and deliberation around them, which is absolutely needed, and we're not that far along yet. We are far enough along, though, to be able to share with you some of the deliberation we've had to date. The other issues, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, what we have decided to do is incorporate a couple of those. So 4 and 6 would be issues, and also 9 would be issues that we are going to pull into issue number 2 to find ways in which we may be able to put forward proposed amendments to the charter that will retain the spirit of some of those issues as and where appropriate. And indeed, I think we can safely say that we would want to get Randy Gaylord's opinion on some of those matters, but we're certainly not there yet. In terms of the issue of as much as I really like this one, entertain development of a county level consular office for foreign, Canadian, and Native tribal affairs. Kyle put forward that perhaps we withdraw this one given its complexity. And then a couple of others, as you'll see there, I think it is 3 that pertain to, or 2 rather, no, there are 3 that pertain to issues related to equal access to health and oversight of the provision of health services, mental health, housing, et cetera. We haven't yet discussed those and the appropriateness of this committee to be delving into those, but we will be discussing that in our next meeting. And finally, issue number 8, which is related to the rights of children. You know, the notion of an educational office, we felt that this is the notion of rights of children is something that, again, we could consider under discussion of issue number 2. Okay, so that's where we stand with the spreadsheet that was given to us of issues to deal with. So issues under discussion at a sort of bigger picture level at present that we have been doing quite a bit of deliberating on, and we have had a couple of presentations to us, and I'll speak to that in my next slide. But ones that we're keen to work further on are the notion of a creation of an independent citizen-led Office of Justice and Equity Oversight for the county through an amendment to the charter that requires the county council to create such an ordinance. We are aware, for example, of a charter amendment that was made by Snohomish County in 2016 when a Commission on Human Rights was struck by that county's council through an ordinance that was included in a charter amendment when they went through their charter review process that year. So that is where that notion came from. There's plenty of deep diving we need to still do on this, but we certainly have done a lot of thinking about the importance of this, and thinking about how would such a body that has citizens represented on it going to interact with the Law and Justice Council of the current government. So we had some discussion with the Office of the Superior Court Justice about that, which was very informative. And so we've had other deliberations as well on, for example, the role of the Civil Service Board, which oversees staffing of the Office of the Sheriff, the elected Office of the Sheriff, and some things there that we'd like to consider further, and why creating such a body as an Office of Justice and Equity Oversight that would be citizen led would be important. So that's a really major issue under discussion for us. The second major issue, and again, it relates to number 2 in the previous slide, issue number 2, and that's the integration of themes of non-discrimination, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion as cross-cutting themes within the charter. I think one of our findings that was, and I may have referred to this previously in one of our other meetings, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I think this issue is very well worth repeating. And rather, it's something we discovered working with the MRSC and information they were able to provide us, and that is that there are only 2 of 7 charter counties that do not have a single clause that speaks at all to non-discrimination, and we're one of them. And so there is nothing in this charter that speaks to these extremely important, fundamental human justice, human rights issues. And so we feel that there are a number of different places and ways in which these themes need to be brought up, given existing structure of our county government. And so I'll stop there on that point, and we can discuss that further. And finally, as we observe the work of the other committees that is underway, and as we've been all having similar presentations to the larger commission, we feel it's absolutely critical that our committee works with other committees to examine how to integrate these themes in meaningful ways and impactful ways throughout sections of the charter, and explore the creation perhaps of a new section of the charter that can reflect these themes, maybe with environment and climate change as well, a la the Bill of Rights that we keep talking about. So we recognize the imperative to have that kind of cross collaboration, and a little bit more on that in the next slide. So next steps and further considerations or consultations and research. We've had limited consultations to date, not as many as we would have liked, but we have, as I said, heard from the Superior Court of San Juan County, from our justice there, as well as Linnea Anderson, who works in her office as well and manages all manner of programming that is overseen by that office. We also had a very good presentation by an expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion who's based on Orcas Island. And he, with a number of others, not only from Orcas, but I believe San Juan as well, were involved in the work on the San Juan County Resolution number 31 on safe and inclusive communities that was passed last year. So we had a very good discussion with him. We have a list of guest speakers developed with more presentations or / discussions that we need to have going forward to further our work, recognizing, yes, timelines, and that's something perhaps we can talk about together in a moment, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done and considered and thought about, and legal opinions obtained as necessary. And as I said previously, the need to consult with other CRC committees to look at the integration of these really important justice and equity themes throughout sections of the charter where they currently are silent. And so that would include, and we can talk a little bit about that, definitely would include operations. It will include process, as we've alluded to earlier in the conversation today. It definitely would include climate change and environment and other committees as needed. So with that, I will stop sharing and open it up for conversation and ask for your ask for you all to consider joining our committee, because Bob, you have 5, we've got 4, and one of those is Mr. Chair. And man, I think we had our first meeting with him with sitting in his office was on Monday, because he's in his car, he's on a snowboard, it's just crazy. Trying to get this guy pinned down is impossible. So anyway, we're pretty passionate about what we're working on. We would welcome the bright lights and brilliant minds of any of you to join us. We've got some serious work to do, and I think in our shared committee opinion, I'll let others speak for themselves. We care about this stuff, and we would very much like to do meaningful things. And God, it may take until the end of the year, but it's so important. So thank you, and questions and answers. Maureen, I thought that was no questions. Okay.
I want to ask you, would this, the Justice and Equity Group, would they be appointed by the council?
Okay, no.
Treat it like a commission or a board, or what?
That's a very good question. One thing I want to say, and then I'm going to let Kevin speak to this a little bit more. One thing I want to say is we are acutely aware of the multiplicity of councils and committees and commissions that exist in our county government already. Yeah. I think some of us on the governance committee recognize that's actually somewhat problematic. We are not going to recommend that this body be another one of those councils or commissions or committees, not at all. We want this entity to have some measure of oversight. And indeed, that's where it begins to get a bit legal in terms of knowing what that could be, what that could look like. Obviously, we're going to need to pin that down a little more based on further consulting and researching we're going to do, and get legal opinion on that. So Maureen, in a quick answer to your question is, it is not going to be another one of those rather toothless entities that just perpetually recommends things to the council that may or may not, depending on their level of priority, be picked up or not.
So what you're kind of saying, if I may ask again, you're proposing the establishment of a new council, of a separate council. I mean, that would be something that could go on the ballot.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, go ahead. I think you wanted to say it, pitch in.
I wouldn't call it a new council.
Well, no.
But just because the confusion there.
A Justice and Equity kind of commission or something.
The question has been that it would have teeth, that this would truly, this is not an advisory board, this is an oversight board. And similar to our previous discussion, we have not gotten deep into the legal research we need to do of exactly how and where that oversight would take place. And that is starting, but needs to get much more in depth. But the goal is
power, right?
Sorry?
With subpoena power?
Oh, I don't know. We haven't discussed that. But you could, it depends. And the conversation started as oversight over law and justice entirely. So it would be the prosecutor, the courts, and the sheriff's department, not just the sheriff. I will also say that there has also been a discussion in the committee that was interesting. There are other entities within county government that definitely need to be focused on equity and justice issues, not just the justice area and the law and justice area. And so the other conversation was, should it just be a justice and equity commission that has oversight authority over the county, over different departments to consider too? And so that was another question that was going to be raised with each of you to start thinking about. But that's all I would add in there. And then I've got a list of people here. Sorry, I was muted in the beginning and didn't realize it.
Kevin, if I could just add one further finding that we've come up with so far, just as a bit of an example, and yeah, to Kevin's point, we're still kind of early in conceptualizing this, but just by example, I mean, there is plenty of affirmative action legislation in this state, and so some of what this speaks to is the need for actually using affirmative action to do things to respect the diversity of the population that lives in this county, and perhaps ensure that the manner in which justice is being served and the manner in which the services are being delivered are done in a way that is respectful, and so on and so forth. So there's multiple ways in which this county could be considering things that it's currently not. And I'm going to repeat what I said with regard to what we were informed by the sheriff, and it's not an attack on the sheriff at all, but the civil service board that oversees the hiring in his office can be directed by him to apply affirmative action to bring people into his force that are more representative of the population. And I doubt many of you were aware of that, but that is because we have affirmative action legislation in the state. Okay, so anyway, that's a point I wanted to make. In other words, this isn't coming from nowhere. I mean, we obviously need to refer back to the Washington state laws, et cetera. And anyway, okay, I'll be quiet.
I've got Olivia.
Thank you so much, Jane. Great presentation. I hope that all of the committee leads take a look at how Jane just presented. That was so clear and informative. Thank you. So, can you please reiterate one more time? We are one of 2 counties of the 7 charter counties in Washington that do not have what specific language?
Any
well, yeah, there's that.
Any language pertaining to non-discrimination, any language that forbids the county government to function in a manner that is discriminatory. In other words, we do not have anything in our county charter that upholds non-discrimination legislation that exists at the state level.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have Janet and then Tony.
Jane and the rest of your committee, I am so appreciative of the work that is going on this, hugely. My question is, in terms of almost what you're talking about, in terms of infusing and creating the language that will be in the charter, what is the process going to be for that? And because it seems like you also want to get some legal advice, from someone, and then are you going to bring back that particular language to us so we can look at it?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Janet. Yes. So the notion of infusing these important themes into the language of the charter is something that really got traction on Monday. And this is why we feel collaborative effort with the other committees is key. I'll give you one example, and that is the work that Maureen's leadership in the Committee on Operations it's important for us to intersect with them because of the discussions they've been having about the Human Resources Manual, okay, of the county government. Well, there are things we would want to ensure, perhaps with language in the charter, that vis-a-vis the way in which human resources is managed and conducted in this county is more inclusive, is equity focused, is welcoming of diversity, that kind of thing. So, whether we can find a way of inserting a clause. I don't think it's going to be just one clause though, because if we are thinking about something bigger in the way of oversight that touches on different parts of our government, then we need to be thinking about, you know, in the work that Maureen's committee is doing, is there language that should be there, you know? So in other words, we haven't, that's what really why we need to be intersecting more with the other committees, because we don't want to be doing things at cross purposes. And yeah, if that answers your question.
I have Tony and then Patty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jane, what a great presentation. And I know you were on the elections committee as well, and I appreciated your input then as well. Very thoughtful.
Thank you.
The question I have is not a gotcha question. It's more that I want to learn, because I just want to kind of learn this. So the beginning part of the charter talks about we are in observance of the state constitution and the federal constitution. What impetus that you have seen in the county that caused us to consider putting language in the charter that enumerates some of these things that need to be looked at in specifically? Is there a problem that is obvious to us that I'm missing? Is it a problem that we need to be able to resolve, or should we just follow the Constitution of Washington, which I can't see anywhere that we have a good reason to discriminate or to do anything of those items that are already illegal? So anyway.
Yeah, appreciate the question, Tony. I'm not trying to suggest that what the county government is doing is behaving illegally or anything of that matter, that elected offices are doing that kind of thing. What I can tell you through our deliberations is that there is plenty of discrimination that takes place in this county, and there's plenty of evidence of it. And whether it's prosecuted every day or every month or every year, that's another issue. The point is, when you have, to reiterate the point I made a few minutes ago about some basic affirmative action legislation that is meant to be enacted by the Civil Service Board, if the sheriff chooses for that board to function in that way, it's not happening. As far as the sheriff knows, he can't tell the Civil Service Board to bring a female candidate from position number 7 to position number 1 on the list of people to choose from, because she couldn't do enough sit-ups. Okay, so the discrimination is happening without seeing it. Unless you put wording in there that says it can't happen at the county level, then it's too easy for it to infuse accidentally or deliberately. Now, the other point I'm going to make is, I think if you can look at, we've only looked at 5 other county charters. I'm sure we could look at the rest of the charters of governments in this, of municipal governments and local governments in this state, and see what language they have on non-discrimination. The purpose of having a clause of that nature is because then it holds the county government responsible directly for being non-discriminatory in the way in which it functions, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Can I just follow up, Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yeah.
So is that a charter item, or is that something that's procedural where the departments need to be more aware of their discriminatory practices and be called on that? So the question here is this a charter item as in governance, or is it an item that should be more procedural in nature?
Okay, well, it's a good question. And again, what I need to do with the committee is see exactly where those non-discrimination clauses are in those county charters, see where they fall within the different articles of those charters, and draw a lesson from that. And so that will be part of what we need to look at. But indeed, there's definitely a procedural aspect to this. There's no question whatsoever, which is why we need to talk to ops. I see Maureen's hand up and a couple others. So it's procedural, but it's also more structural than that. And that's why an oversight office could be of value.
Thank you. Well done. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jane, just to add on quickly before I've got Patty and Maureen, but Tony, in response to that too, and Bob, sorry, one of the reasons why there's been discussion to create a Justice and Equity Oversight Committee is because a lot of the actions we're talking about would be put forward by that committee, not in the charter itself. The charter would establish the framework to allow some of these really important things to take place. So I think and a lot of that detail is yet to be worked out, but that's the thinking. I have Patty and then Maureen and then Bob.
Kevin, Anne Marie's hand has been up for quite a while. I don't know if she's not on your screen.
I know.
Sorry,
I don't know.
Marie.
I don't know how to put my hand up like that.
Hey, I got Patty earlier. Marie, why don't we go to you then, and then I'll go Patty, Maureen, Bob.
So I'll be quick. I just wanted to say that in the front of the personnel manual, there is this.
What?
I'm sorry, did you say Patty go first?
You go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Please let Patty go.
I just don't want to forget my question, which was, and you guys are all off on a really good discussion, but my question is kind of naive and it's more basic to this one and what we've talked about with the other elected official. My concern is about enforcement. I mean, we can have all of this, but what is the power for this office? Or, I mean, they don't make laws, but who enforces that the law is? I mean, you've got an oversight committee, and do they have any enforcement powers? You have a, an environmental officer, and what is the enforcement there? That's all my question is, what is the enforcement of what we're talking about?
Excellent. Thank you, Patty. And yeah, totally hear your point. And indeed, indeed, this is part of what we need to look into. Absolutely.
I will also say it's the reason why we're talking about an oversight committee as opposed to an advisory committee. That's the biggest difference, is there would be teeth with an oversight committee.
What are the teeth?
That's the legal research that we're still doing. And so today's presentations are to get the commission up to speed on where the discussions are. There's a lot of unanswered questions with everything we're hearing today, because the committees are just where you are in your committees, which is good ideas have come up. We've said, yes, we want to do that. And now we're saying, oh my God, what does that really mean? So I've got Maureen and then, no, I've got Anne-Marie, Maureen, and then Bob.
So Jane, thanks so much. That was really great. And the work you all are doing is so important. I was wondering if this is similar to what King County just passed with their charter, and if the commission would be elected.
Okay, Kevin, you want to speak to that because you're the one most conversant with the King County Charter Amendment and the commission they
It is
established.
similar to what was discussed in King County. King County was more focused, so not solely, but more focused on the sheriff's department than law and justice overall. But the King County example was the catalyst for this discussion. It was a recognition of what King County had done began this entire discussion. And I'm sorry, what was the second half?
Will it be a commission that's elected?
The discussion so far has been that it would be not necessarily elected, it could be appointed, but that we would detail out what sorts of persons would be on that commission. So similar to some of our other appointed commissions, there are certain slots that have to be filled. And so that has been part of the discussion, but there's not been confirmation on that. And I would turn it over to Jane to see if I'm getting that right.
Yeah, no, yes, I don't differ with you on that. My brain went to something else to give Anne-Marie an example of, and I mentioned it before, and that is that amendment that the Snohomish County Charter made to include in their amendment that an ordinance be passed by the council to create a human rights commission. Okay, yes. One of the conversations we need to have is with that county, and Kevin has a contact with the, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, the county manager, but so we want to talk to them about the establishment of that Human Rights Commission, which has now been in place for, I think it is 3 years. They have a website actually. I just at first glance, and I don't mean to, I just want to point this out. I looked on the calendar of that Human Rights Commission online to see what kind of events they celebrate. And interestingly, they don't have on their calendar of events International Women's Day on March 8th. So that's just sort of implicit bias perhaps, or it's just a little bit of blindedness. But the point is, you really need to be thoughtful in what you're trying to create here. And so I think it's good for us to get examples from other experiences, both King County, Snohomish County, and get more deep and rich research into this that's relevant to our state.
And just in conclusion, as someone who's worked in the federal and the state government, I was horrified by what the sheriff said in terms of his recruitment, because it was so far off base. I just could not believe it.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I wish you'd actually said something sooner.
The individual from Snohomish County, if others want to join, we're hoping to hear from Dave Summers, who's the Snohomish County executive, who was instrumental in that work in Snohomish County. And he has said he will speak to us. We just don't have a date yet. I have Maureen and then Bob. And in 5 minutes,
Okay.
we're going to go to public comment.
Okay, I'll be very quick. My head is exploding with all these incredible ideas. There are just so many vectors to this. It's just very powerful stuff. All I wanted to point out is in the front page of the personnel manual is a mission statement and guiding principles. And those are exactly, to me, the things that should be in the charter, which is a kind of brittle, dry document. And I think it's an evolving document. And that's the sort of thing that needs to be in the charter. So I am hoping, because it's important to me that everything gets integrated, that we somehow make sure that the language that we're going to pick up and utilize in all these pieces are all, you know, coming from the exact same place. So anyway, I'll let you go.
Yeah,
there.
thank you. Thank you for that. And Maureen, you shared with us already, right? That human resources manual?
Yes, and if anyone needs it again, I'm happy to resend it.
Okay, okay. But thank you for pointing that out. And I saw some of the revisions that were being made and I didn't have a chance to dive into them. So I'm probably going to circle back with you on some of that.
I'm happy to chat with you.
Excellent. Thank you.
And just to clarify, Catherine just let me know that we have confirmed the date with Dave Summers, and he will be presenting to the entire CRC on April 21st. So we will all have that opportunity. And the reason I asked that he speak to the full CRC is because he is the Snohomish County executive. And before that, he was on the county council, and he's worked very closely with several charter commissions and written charters. I thought that it would be a very valuable presentation for all of us. So we will all hear from him on the 21st. I have Bob.
All right. Jane, before I address you, could I ask a question of Maureen? Maureen, you just mentioned the Human Resources Manual, and on the front page, there was a quotation in there that you thought ought to be in the charter. Could you possibly send me that manual, or at least the front page of it, so I could take a look at that? Because that's where we are. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, Jane, thank you so much for the thoughtful presentation. I need to be straightened out about something. I'm getting old, my eyesight's kind of going, and I was trying to read what you had written, and it looked like you had said that you wanted our council to create to pass an ordinance that created this commission. And is that accurate? Is that what you're suggesting?
Okay, so yeah, to go back to the reference I made to the Snohomish County Charter, the amendment they included in that charter was they were directing the council of Snohomish County to draft and pass an ordinance that would establish a human rights commission. Okay, that's what I was referring to. So in terms of whether, in terms of the directions that we are considering here, in terms of an equity and justice, or justice and equity oversight body, what we would probably do, and again, this is where we'll need to do further legal research, is there would be an amendment to the charter that would direct the council to do something similar. In other words, pass an ordinance that would establish this body. I don't know yet though, Bob, so that may not be a very good or accurate response to your question.
You know, my feeling about it is if the charter, if the council wanted to do this, they would have done it. Wouldn't we be better off creating this thing ourselves, putting it in the charter and saying, this is going to happen?
If I can respond to that. So the other there's been parallel conversations in the subcommittee, and one of them has been exactly that, Bob. And the King County example is that the charter does it. And I'm a firm believer that we should put this in the charter so that it's more permanent.
Please,
County council can reverse a decision of a previous county council on the flip of a dime.
don't do
And
that.
so just, yeah, and I'll just to piggyback on that comment, I mean, we did early on discover this, this resolution number 31 passed by the council back in June in the middle of a difficult year around anti-racism protests, et cetera. And we spoke with the county manager, and then we heard a little bit further about the extent to which this resolution is actually getting some life breathed into it. And we talked a little bit we heard from Cindy Wolf on that as well. We asked her a question on that when she spoke to us. They passed a resolution committing the county government to fostering a safe and inclusive community in San Juan County. And to go to Anne Marie's point about, you know, whether things get onto the top of the list of priorities that the county has, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And so our observation based on some of the interviewing we did and the findings of those questions is that a resolution is not going to be strong enough. They already have a resolution, okay? And so I support the point you're making there, Bob, in that. And additionally, also just for your information, so everybody's aware, I did make a request to our county manager that Kevin was copied on, asking him to provide a gender and diversity disaggregated breakdown of the staff of our county of both elected and appointed offices, and offered to do pro bono a bit of a gender and diversity analysis of the staff of this county government, because it needs to be done anyway as part of their work on that resolution. And I can assure you, that's where you're going to begin to learn about what this county is made of in terms of the population that comprises it. So that will be something we'll produce.
So I want to pause us. I see other hands. I will circle back to you if we have time. It is 5:51 and I want to go to public comment. And so I will pause this discussion and ask if there are any members of the public here that would like to speak. And if so, turn on your video and take yourself off mute. Alexandra, please. And then Minor.
I want to say thank you to the committee that's working on equity and justice. It's an issue that I haven't really paid any attention to, and it highlights for me, because I've been really passionately involved in the environmental issues, that those of us who are passionate about something make certain assumptions about what other people are surely aware of, and that resistance to our ideas, you know, is somehow out there floating around that people are naturally going to resist. But what I've become aware of as I've taken the last 3 months to really learn about environmental issues, it's really raised the level of my concern and interest and knowledge. And the same could become true of easily if I put attention onto the equity and justice issues. So I just want to say thanks and encourage any kind of, like, whenever you say something.
Oops.
We can't hear you anymore, Alexandra.
Like, well, we had this conversation with, yes, no?
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
Now we can. Okay. Did you hear anything I just said?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So the last bit was just when someone made a comment about how they were appalled at what the sheriff's office said regarding equity and justice. Examples would be really helpful, because I think there are a lot of people who are really blind to the significance of this issue. And so the findings are going to be really important. And I think we should trust that there's a lot of openness to being educated. If people, you know, are trusted to do the right thing once they know more about what's going on, that we should trust people to just what I said, you know, to take the time to do public education and not assume that people are going to vote against something prior to doing that education. So thanks again.
Thank you. Minor?
I'm
sorry, Minor. Before you go, Alexandra, if I missed it, I'm sorry, but could you just introduce yourself and say where you're from for the record?
Alexandra Gayak, Orcas Island.
Thank you. Minor, please.
And I'm Minor Lyle. I live on Orcas Island and am reporting on the Charter Review Commission for Islands Weekly, Journal of the San Juans, and the Sounder, the sound publications portfolio. It gets a little lonely, so it feels a little lonely sometimes hiding there behind the drop screen. So I thought it'd be nice to show my face and say hello. Hi, everybody.
We can see.
And I have a request. So I've done 6 articles so far, pretty much going through the town hall meetings and the identification of the various issues that you are all considering. And I've found this evening's meeting to be very interesting and intriguing. I've been keeping track of the committee or subcommittee meetings, depending on what you prefer to call those, through the YouTube, and really appreciate all the information, documentation, and videos that are available through the Charter Review Commission webpage. It'd be helpful from a reporter's perspective to have access to your issues status reports that the various committees, I understand, are keeping. There's been one posted so far on the webpage from the Governance Committee, and it's helpful just in terms of having a sense of where to look in the various videos, which tend to be about an hour to an hour and a half in length, for where different issues are being discussed, so I can keep up with your progress at the committee level. And it was an interesting coincidence. This morning I was looking at the April 1st Governance Committee meeting, and there was a discussion of whether to continue to provide that issue status update on the webpage, and the committee thought that it was appropriate not to do that because it might confuse people who were not aware that it was a kind of a progress report that was continuously changing. But I have a feeling that people like myself who are down in the weeds that far are going to be able to understand that it's kind of a work in progress and you're proceeding towards your ultimate recommendation. So I just wanted to request that in addition to your minutes, you also include updated issue status reports. And I'm aware I can request those also through public records requests, but it would just, I think, facilitate the process. So thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Minor. Any other members of the public that would like to say anything? Well, thank you very much for being here. We will close public comment and go back to, I want to see, is there any new business? Okay, Bob, and then Tony had his hand up on the previous topic. So I just wanted to get a sense of, is there any other new business? Okay, Bob and Kyle. So why don't we go to those two, Bob and then Kyle?
Yes, I got this postcard today. Some of you may have gotten it. I found it to be interesting. It's from the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation, and it is about the Maritime Washington National Heritage area. And they've sent out, they're asking us to respond to anybody who gets this, and to respond to a survey as to what we want preserved in our maritime environment, and why and how, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to bring this to folks' attention and tell you that you can get the same information that I've got on this card by going to this address, which is preservewa.org/ahoy. And it's pretty interesting. There's also the announcement of a virtual public workshop for Island and San Juan counties on May 6th at 5 p.m. Okay. And, there's a bunch of different areas, and we're one of them. And I think we're the last one.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's probably a question for Olivia and Catherine. I've been trying to kind of keep a map of some of the progress and kind of hits on a matrix for climate and environment. And I wonder what are the limitations to posting the YouTubes? What's the delay? How does that work? So like after this meeting, is it staff time? that delays the YouTube post, and how does that work? And can I help with that maybe and move that forward?
So every other day, I'm sending an email with recording a link to our IT department, and they are the ones that upload to the YouTube account. So I've been doing it every other day. If you ever need a link, immediately after a meeting. So for example, I'm going to send David Dellendorf the link to the meeting that happened today, so he doesn't have to wait for it to go onto YouTube. If you ever need that, your leads have the login information to the county or the Charter Review Commission Zoom account. You can go to meetings, you can click recordings, you can share, you can copy that link, you can open it. You can also contact me directly and I will get you the link if your lead doesn't feel comfortable finding that information.
I think I have all that. Thanks for that routing, Olivia. Appreciate it. Okay,
we are right at 6 o'clock. Tony, you had your hand up on the previous subject. Is there something you needed to say still?
No, not important anymore. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, wonderful. I want to thank Anne-Marie and Jane for the presentations today. It was great to get an update from the committees. I want to thank all the commissioners for a really thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation on both subject areas. I think this is exactly the sort of dialogue we need to start having. And so while some questions were asked that didn't have answers to, that's exactly why we wanted to have this discussion, so that the committees can start looking into those questions if they haven't already. So with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn. Bill said so move and Dick seconded. Okay. Thank you all. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
Good night.
Thank
you,
all.
everyone.
good
Bonsoir.
night.
Bonsoir.
Bonne nuit.
We lost Kevin. Sorry. Olivia, you're muted.
I even put it on his calendar. Come back, Kevin. Oh, I think we're still recording.
Oh yeah, sorry.